Good evening. Welcome to Thursday edition of Cornell Sports and Entertainment Week. Tonight's topic is the future of marketing. My name is Tim McGee. I am a Cornell alum and the panel moderator for tonight's discussion. I have spent about 25 years in partnership marketing, a variety of roles with brands and agencies. Most notably, I ran sponsorships for AT&T for a number of years. In the past 8 years, I've had my own consultancy where I've worked with brands and properties on various aspects of sponsorship, partnership, and event marketing. But enough about me. Let's talk about our panelists. Introducing in alphabetical order, first we have Andrew Cohen. Andrew is the Vice President of Global Sponsorship Commercialization at Visa, a company he's been with for 16 years, since 2004. In his time at the company, he's had a variety of roles, including leading their global brand and creative team, working with their integrated global marketing communications team, and managing their North American partnerships, including the NFL, NASCAR, and the USOC. So welcome, Andrew. Next, we have Jennifer Keene. Jennifer is the Vice President of Personalities at Octagon, a leading sports marketing agency. In her role as Vice President, she's responsible for leading a dedicated and sales and marketing team in their sales efforts for their talent and brand partnerships, sponsor-driven properties, speaking engagements, and other business dealings. Before Octagon, Jennifer was with the NBA and was with a law firm, Williams & Connolly in DC, where she oversaw their marketing efforts for the talent they represented. And last but certainly not least, we've got Jason Pearl. Jason is the Senior Vice President and Chief Business Development Officer for the San Francisco Giants. Jason has spent almost his entire career with the team, 28 years in a variety of roles, and he has grown into his most recent position over the last several years. Most recently, Jason oversaw the new naming rights deal that the Giants engaged with Oracle. So welcome, Jason, Jennifer, and Andrew. So let's get started. The panel discussion is the future of marketing. We're going to talk about that. But before we look forward, I want to just take a couple of minutes to look backwards. Most notably, I want to look to about 7 or 8 months ago, March of 2019, when the pandemic hit. So the question I have for the panel is, when it hit, what was your immediate thought and what were the immediate first steps that you did to sort of batten down the hatches and take care of the partnerships that you were responsible for at that time? Jennifer, we'll start with you.
Certainly. Thanks for having me, Tim. It's great to speak to the Cornell community. Thinking back to the middle of March when this was all kind of sinking in, that it wasn't going to be a short road to get out of the pandemic, my first thought was, damn, I don't get to go to Maui. I had booked our client, Emmett Smith, for a speaking engagement there. And one of the perks of the job is that we accompany our clients to many of their commitments, including to Maui. And it was at the partner's expense. So sadly, they took their time making that decision to cancel, but the writing was on the wall. We all knew it was coming. And we all know it probably won't be rescheduled for Miami. It'll probably be somewhere like Topeka. No offense to Topeka. So really, it was a process of managing client expectations right from the start and just making them understand kind of what their obligations were going to be, how some of the revenue that they had on the books might be impacted, speaking with our attorneys to determine what clauses could apply, whether it's a force majeure situation, and really just to, brace themselves for potentially a long shutdown.
So Jennifer, before I ask the other panel members, can you just, for the benefit of people who may not be familiar with that term, what do you mean by force majeure?
Force majeure, literally translated, means force of nature. And most contracts that we do with talent partnerships or with, sponsorships of venues, et cetera, will include a force majeure clause to say, if Mother Nature, basically sends the plague on us, these are the implications of what happens. And it generally causes terminations that termination rights to kick in that would not be there. It spells out what it means as far as if compensation is owed for rights previously granted or not. And it kind of sets a roadmap for worst case scenarios.
And clearly this roadmap is going to be a big part of the future of partnerships as we come out of this. So, Jason, you were, sort of starting to wind down spring training for the Giants. Your team hadn't broken camp yet, but, take us through what you were thinking sort of when this new reality hit.
Can I say, oh, shit?
Apparently you can.
I'm not even sure where to begin. I mean, I think you're right. We were gearing up for the season. We had a lot of balls in the air. I think we just weren't sure how long this was going to last. So the first thing we did was really to come up with a communication strategy for our partners. And I think we did that fairly well. I mean, as well as possible. And Andrew I can see him nodding his head, but I'm sure he's going to have some comments because Visa is one of our most important and most valued partners. But communication was critical, and communication externally to all of our partners and letting them know where our head was, what we thought was going to happen, and that we committed to communicating on a regular basis, whether we had any news or not. And that we kept that going, continue to keep that going, frankly, until now. So that was external communications, and then internal communications was arguably more important, which we had so much going on to prepare the ballpark for the season. We had people going back and forth between Arizona. We had lots of things happening in Arizona for spring training camp, and we had to shut all that down. But we had a lot of people who were both in Arizona and in San Francisco. Getting everybody to someplace safe, secure was super important. And then getting our team to come up with new ways to communicate internally. We had toyed around with communication tools like Zoom and Slack, but we all quickly became experts in how to use that, both internally and externally. So I think that was critical. And then to Jennifer's point, started looking at each one and every one of our contracts, and we have about 150 partners with the San Francisco Giants right now, and understanding what the impact would be. And along with that, we have force majeure language in all of our contracts as well. I've been doing this, as you mentioned, Tim, for a very long time. I've never had to take a look at force majeure and understand what it really means, and how it helps us and how it helps and protects our clients too. So that was an important part of the process.
I think all of us in this business became experts to one extent or another on the whole concept of force majeure. It's interesting. One of the deals I did on behalf of a client, when it got to the legal folks to put pen to paper, that was the last thing that held up the deal for about 2 weeks. And I thought to myself, well, they're never going to invoke the force majeure clause in this contract. And sure enough, the first game that my client's partner was supposed to play in the NFL was canceled because of a hurricane. So interesting, So I was a little bit more aware of it than maybe some people were, but we're all experts to one extent or another. So, and Andrew, little bit different situation for you. You are the client, the partner. You write checks for the most part, as opposed to cashing them, which Jason and Jennifer like to do on behalf of their employer. So take us back to last March and how it came down within the walls of Visa.
Yeah, I mean, remembering back to March, we are, 2.5, 3 months outside of the Tokyo Olympics. We are a global sponsor of the Olympic Games, have been for 30 plus years and will be for another dozen years. So, similar to Jennifer, thinking about that trip to Japan, thinking about, all the work that's happening that needs to happen, similar to Jason, thinking about the planning for the games themselves, but probably the single largest marketing expense we'll make in calendar year 20. Not to mention, we've got thousands of guests, whether they be consumer prize winners or clients that we are bringing to the games. We've got a payment infrastructure that we're putting in place. And, I think to Jason's point about communication, I think partnership really has been brought to the test this year, because I think, you really get into discussions that you're not planning on happening, that you haven't planned on having with people, and that's where I think partnership really comes into play. And so, you've got an organization like the IOC that's got incredible number of constituencies that they need to kind of take into account. It is the TOCOG will be a Fortune 100 company for the length of its time, and so the thought about how we engage with them or our considerations are one of many that they're thinking about. And so what we needed to do was really look at kind of our calendar and our timeline and start to make decisions based on what we think might happen. There's any number of gates that we're going to need to go through between, March and July, where we're going to outlay money, we're going to make investments, and we're going to be making that based on information that we may only have half the picture on, because, in March, at least at the beginning of March, there wasn't clarity as to what was going to happen. So, we kind of had to fly a little bit blind, take our best guess on what we thought was going to happen, and then make decisions with no thought of looking back if the choice we made might have been the incorrect one. I will say that our expectation was that the games were going to be postponed before it was announced, and and that's not based on insider knowledge. It's just based on the way we thought it was going to go, and so we made those decisions based on that. And fortunately, if you can say that, it worked out. But certainly, if the games had happened as planned, we would have made some decisions that probably would have been the wrong ones.
So two things. I want to stick with you for just a moment, Andrew. Two things. Though. Number one, TOCOG, for those of you who don't know, is the Tokyo Olympic Organizing Committee.
Yep.
They are the body that runs the Olympic Games. So just want to make sure we may have some people who may not be aware of that. But Andrew, without throwing anybody under the bus, and maybe giving a shout out to somebody who deserves
San Francisco Giants.
Good answer.
Well, no, you don't know if it was under the bus or a shout out, Jason.
Fair point.
So
thumbs up either way.
So Andrew, you would have lost points on Jeopardy, I believe, for bringing in too early. But the question is, were there any partners that you had that were particularly good in terms of being proactive with communicating to you, that we can learn from going forward? Because I hate to use terms like pivot and new normal, but this idea of the new normal, part of it is going to entail truly a partnership. I used to joke with guys like Jason was, when I was on the client side, until checks start going in two directions, it's not truly a partnership, right? But the fact of the matter is they are partnerships, and we rely on the properties that we spend money with to look out for our best interest as they look out for their own. So I think this new normal will involve a higher degree of collaboration with partners. So are there any that were particularly good at communicating that you worked with?
Yeah, and I hope we're going to come back to that definition of partnership and the new normal, but I'll tell you, my answer doesn't change. It was, Jason and team, and I'm not saying that because he's on the screen and because he lives around the corner from me, but the reality is we were actually in a negotiation with the Giants when the pandemic hit, and certainly and Jason will say as a buyer, that puts me certainly in a better position in terms of leverage. But I don't think between us, and again, I know Jason a long time, I don't feel like there was any dishonesty is the wrong word. I think we were both very transparent about what our situations were. I think the level of communication and transparency was kind of heightened during this time. And, I think we both probably got to the end, and, maybe we feel like we both gave a little and maybe lost a little, but I do think that to the top of the organization of the San Francisco Giants, they were they were great communicators. And honestly, as I think about our roster, and the partnerships that we have, I don't think there was a bad one in the bunch. I think we sponsor the NFL, And I know we shared kind of how we were engaging with the IOC with the NFL, and I think it's something that they took to heart and then shared with other partners. And again, I think also on the IOC, the International Olympic Committee's perspective, very tough position when you think about all the constituencies that they need to manage. They were really they were great in terms of with what they could sharing it when they could.
If I could add the importance of internal communications from the talent perspective within Octagon. We have different silos that are the football group or the Olympic and action sports team. And because we're often traveling very intensely in conflicting seasons, some of my colleagues and I don't really get a chance to have deep conversations or, long discussions about things that we're working on or trends in the industry. And so ever since the shutdown, one of the benefits that really came out of that was the ability for us to kind of spend more time talking to each other and learning from each other in these different experiences. And what we were coping with was quite different. Many of my clients are retired athletes, whereas, my colleague who's the agent for Simone Biles or my colleague who works with Aly Raisman, what they were dealing with was partners wanting to extend the existing partnerships once the Tokyo Games were officially postponed. And in some cases, they were being asked to do so without additional compensation. And so it's like you can see both sides. You can see why the partner would try for that sort of term. And when you're looking at a client of a Simone Biles, of her caliber, it's not necessarily about the money and relying on that as her income. But not every Olympian is of that stature. And there are plenty of Olympians in, lesser known, lesser followed sports that really depend on sponsor income to get them through their training period. Or perhaps they're getting older for their sport and they're thinking about like how they can really maintain their physical fitness for a full other year after really getting themselves to, planning to peak for the summer games. So it's been a really interesting learning experience, and the ability to commiserate has honestly been kind of a gift.
Yeah, thank you, Jennifer. And I just before I ask Jason a question, you sort of in your role you sort of serve two masters. You obviously have your clients that you represent, and you're looking for marketing partnerships for them, but you also have to deal with the brands and companies that avail themselves of your clients. How did you deal with the brand partners that you have worked with and hope to continue working with into the future?
I think it's really, it's a great lesson for everyone to learn is, the type of person that you are really comes out when you're put under stress. And, when you're younger and you're just learning, like you can sometimes lash out and you can say to somebody, I think you're being unreasonable. I can't believe you're asking for that. But really, navigating those difficult times is really where, those relationships become so important. One of the partnerships that I'm really proud of is Emmett Smith has a relationship with Herradura Tequila. It's 10 years. But we do 1 year deals every time because of the way that they're structured corporately. And, there's a certain number of hours and services in the contract. And because we can't do any in-person events right now, we're shifting to virtual. We're using him in kind of an educational capacity with their distributors. But what this is looking like is instead of doing, maybe 3-4 hour commitments, how do I manage their expectations of like, am I going to allow them to do 12 1-hour appearances? How am I going to balance client fatigue? Everybody gets sick of Zooms, celebrity athletes are no different. And so it's really been a process kind of figuring out, which clients, are going to adapt very well in these circumstances and which are going to need a lot more help as far as, the shift to digital, the shift to virtual.
Okay, thanks. Jason, you talked about the importance of internal communications. You and Andrew talked about the importance of communicating with partners. How did you communicate with your fans? Obviously, you were on the cusp of the regular season starting. They weren't going to be coming into the ballpark at that point. We didn't know how long that was going to happen. So, how did you as an organization communicate with your fans, and what types of things did you do that maybe you hadn't done in the past?
Well, before I answer that question, Tim, let me use part of my time to go back and respond to Mr. Cohen's comments, which
Okay.
Just want to say how much I appreciate that feedback and reciprocate that feedback and what Jennifer and Andrew both had to say about the value in our business of relationships and how important it is. We are, at the end of the day, all in a relationship game. And this year, more than any year I've ever done this, relying on those relationships and trusting what we've built together has been so important. And it goes both ways. And I think you both touched upon it, which is this is really about the long game. And you could easily waive a contract and say, well, no, the language is very specific.
Fold your arms.
Yeah, but that doesn't do anybody any good. And we're all veterans in this business and we all recognize that. So just want to acknowledge how important that was in the process and appreciate Andrew's comments. To your question, Tim, relating to our fans and how do we, and I'm gonna also pivot and bring in partnership marketing because I know that's part of what we're doing, is also figuring out how do we bring our sponsors and partners into how we're going to engage fans in this new environment. So part of it was sort of, I'll approach it from two perspectives. One is what do we do with people who bought tickets? And that's a tricky one. And we had to follow the lead of the league, frankly, in terms of we all had to sort of have the same reaction or strategy in terms of when are we canceling games? What are we doing to postpone games? How many games are we going to be able to make up? When are we refunding money? When are we offering credits? All that stuff is very complicated. At the end of the day, similar to our approach with our partners, we want to be generous with our fans. I mean, I think having empathy for everybody who's going through this for different reasons, financially, health and safety wise, making sure that we took care of those who have been with us for a long time, our season ticket holders, and responding to their needs right away was super important. I mentioned communication. Obviously, we're doing a ton of communication, but then we started setting up ways that we could engage through Zoom. So we were doing a weekly chalk talk, and we would bring in current players, former players. Our manager was fantastic, Gabe Kapler, about doing it on a regular basis, and our fans really appreciated that. We were doing giveaways. We were sending gifts to people and surprise and delight opportunities with our partners. And all this stuff was sponsored at some level with different partners. We were very active on social, which we needed to be. We were recording messages from our players out to our fans and out to our partners with a message of support. And then we were recreating games. So we were doing what we like to do in San Francisco. We call it Orange Fridays. We try to celebrate the Giants on Fridays, turn everything orange and black. And we were broadcasting both with our RSN and streaming a great game of the past. So we got to relive some of the amazing games that we've played over the last decade or more, and bringing in some of the talent that played in those games to speak about them during that time. So that's a long way of answering your question, Tim. But the point is, engagement is everything right now. It was everything at that point. So we were just struggling to find ways to do that. And we learned a lot about things that we're going to continue to do.
Mm-hmm. And that's a great segue. We've been looking backwards for this first 20-something minutes on this thing. And obviously the panel is entitled The Future of Marketing. So we'll come back to that whole concept of engagement in just a couple of minutes. But before we do that, let's talk now. Let's look forward as we look into this post-pandemic world. What are some of the things that you'll continue to use as a business tool? And what do you see maybe going away? Something that was unique to this situation and might not necessarily survive, if you will, the return to normalcy when stadiums are filled, when Andrew and his clients are attending World Cup matches and Olympic ceremonies and things like that. And Jennifer's on the plane to Maui with Emmett Smith. Which she's looking forward to, I'm sure. So
might be like Bismarck, North Dakota, but we'll see.
Yeah. So Andrew, what do you see? What do you see changing? What do you see sort of remaining in this post-pandemic world that hopefully we will be entering in sooner rather than later?
Well, with all respect, I hope Skype goes away. There are a lot of platforms that have emerged. and this one proves to be the most challenging. I think there's two things that I think remain and I hope remain. I think number one, there's no pandemic playbook, right? Unless you work at the CDC, you don't have a binder on your shelf that says how to deal with a pandemic. I think organizationally, and it's probably the same for many of you on the phone, whether you're in university or you're in business, your companies had to pivot very quickly from a 100% in-person company to a 100% virtual company. And so, at Visa, you can imagine there's tons of processes and privacy and, looking at different technologies and how they interface. And I think we saw that people could really open doors, not break down walls on process. And, I think people moved at a speed on a lot of that stuff that you would not have expected. And so my hope is that we continue that. I think that's number one. I think number two, when you touch on engagement, I do think we are very much in a virtual world, and we have to be in that virtual world from a pandemic standpoint. But I think that's going to continue. I mean, when you look at Travis Scott in Fortnite, I think that is more and more that's going to happen, regardless of whether or not all of us can find ourselves in a concert venue in the future. And I think the challenge for us as marketers or rights holders or representation is to figure out how we use virtual to our benefit. Again, we partner with some of the largest properties in the world. We're never going to send everybody to those events. And I think the idea of virtual experience has always been something that we've kind of pined after. It's now a requirement. And I think there are going to be industries that are born from this moment that specifically, if they haven't already, that specifically service that. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that in the future.
Great. Before I ask you that same question, Jason, I just want to remind the audience that if you do have questions, please enter them into the chat box, and we'll try to get to as many as we can before the end of this hour. So, Jason, what do you see remaining the same? What do you see changing?
Andrew made some excellent points about what's going to remain the same. I mean, it's amazing to see what people do when they're forced to change habits, and super impressed by my colleagues and our partners in terms of how we've communicated and what we've done to transition to the new world. So in terms of things that, we all get tired of Skype and Zoom, but frankly, I pick up a phone and have a phone call with people, and it feels static. It feels like the olden days. So I see that being more and more how we approach communication is this kind of ability to see people. I don't think this is going to be limited to the pandemic. I think this is the new reality. I think what we've also learned is, good and bad. I think one of the toughest things I think I mentioned about the challenges for my team specifically is got a lot of really young people on my team who they benefit from the dynamics of being together and being in a ballpark environment and that sort of collaboration. But at the same token, we're learning that people can work from home and be productive and efficient. And that is something that I think at least the Giants, I'll speak for the Giants, have been reluctant to embrace, that you have to be in the office and you have to be there for a certain amount of time in order to show your worth. And I don't think that's the case anymore. So I think that's a big change that we're going to continue to see. Mm-hmm. Things going away, if I never see a cardboard cutout of a fan again, that would be great.
Yeah, no, all great points. I think, I know one of my clients is a spirits company, and they have endorsement deals with a number of UFC fighters. And when they do meet and greets before a match or after a match, they're limited to 3 or 4, maybe 5 people who can come back into the dressing room to meet the fighter. We've done Zoom calls with these fighters, and you can do 25, 30 people, and from an engagement perspective, you're touching more people, and it's virtually infinite, right? So, Jennifer, how is your business changed, and what do you see?
On a personal level, it's been a time of, definitely growing pains, but also actual growth. A part of my job, and it's always been kind of a smaller percentage of my responsibilities, has been literary development. I got into book development around 2011. I'd done a few children's books with athletes like Chris Paul before that, but really started to develop books for the adult audience, and just other clientele starting back 9 years ago. And as a lot of my marketing work shut down, I turned my focus to finding new ways to create revenue for clients and for the company. And I was able to really throw myself into book development in a way that I'd never had sufficient time for in the past. And the result has been a number of new clients, new deals, new projects, and it's been amazing. It taps into a different type of creativity in me, and the clients are enjoying it. We recently announced a new book deal with Hall of Fame coach Bill Cowher that will be coming out in time for Father's Day in June with Simon & Schuster. So that's a little plug right there. The only challenge is that now that, my marketing responsibilities have really amped up with the return of the NFL season, I'm suddenly feeling like I'm doing, 2 full-time jobs. The benefit, though, is, like Jason said, the change in workspace, while I'm certainly sick of working from my apartment all these days, the reality is you do get a lot more done in shorter periods of time. And, while you miss the camaraderie of the office, the reduced time spent commuting or interruptions, things like that, it really does have an impact on productivity. One thing that Octagon has done for employees that I really, really appreciate is they've extended summer Fridays for the rest of the year. They're calling it Wellness Fridays. So we have half day every Friday. And it's really just meant to reflect, that people are struggling, people are having a hard time. It's not all gloom and doom, but it's certainly been tough. And they just want to kind of acknowledge, the humanity in all of us, and that we all do need to take time to really step away from our responsibilities. So long as client responsibilities can be managed, we try to take advantage of it.
Well, so that spurs another question in my head. I think, all of you, if you're not in your current roles, I believe you are, you're managing teams of people.
Mm-hmm.
And how have you, changed the way you manage people? What challenges have you faced in managing staff remotely? I know, Jason, you talked about the fact that the Giants had been slow to embrace remote working. I think, Jennifer, you on the agency side, I think, agencies are a little bit more flexible, but a lot of the agency leaders that I have spoken to over the last several months really were pleasantly surprised with how well their team, especially young members of teams, have adapted to working from home. So, Jason, you manage people, and I'm sure there's a variety of experience and levels of maturity in those people. But how has it changed you as a manager and a leader?
It's a great question, Tim. It's hard to admit. I mean, I think I'm much more empathetic. I would say I have a full-on recognition not only of people's challenges, work challenges and frustrations, but their personal challenges now, because the two overlap so much. And I find myself really checking in with the group and then with individuals on a regular basis to understand how they're doing, because you can't tell that over Zoom and through email communication. And to Jennifer's point, no one's doing well in this environment. I mean, we're all managing and we're all getting by, and next to 99% of the world, we're all doing great. But that doesn't mean it's not hard.
Mm-hmm.
And you throw in the challenges of the young people who may live on their own in a studio apartment in the city, and they're not seeing anybody, and compare that to the challenges of people who have young families and there's no daycare and there's no school, and they're trying their work and they're trying to take care of their kids.
Whether they're caretakers of their parents or another family member, and people are juggling a lot.
Yeah.
And it's just, fortunately as an organization, I've really felt that from the top down, where we're all really checking on each other. And, you can't, one of my clients has, taught me the term syndemic. So it's like on one hand, you've got the pandemic, but then you also have, the calls for criminal justice reform. You've got George Floyd. And so you also have to consider, what different people in your organization are experiencing in different ways. There's different weight to all of these things that we're going through in 2020. So taking the time to really check in with members of your team, your peers, your mentor, your mentee, it really matters. People need to know that they're not alone through all of this, and that if they need an ear, there's somebody out there, hopefully multiple somebodies that actually cares.
Yeah, just to build on that, I think how are you doing has become an actual question that you want to hear the answer to, as opposed to
Absolutely.
a way to start a meeting. And, to Jennifer's point, and sorry to quote Jason partially, it's been a shitty 8 months, right? All the things that Jennifer said, plus probably 7 other things. And, you ask somebody how they're doing and they say not good. And then it's like, which thing are you talking about? So I fully agree with Jason on the empathy point. We are coworkers, colleagues, friends, and all that stuff has to kind of weigh into the equation and the interaction. And it's important. It's been important for me to just take the time and actually hear a real answer to that question of how you're doing, as opposed to using it as a way to get to the real point of the meeting.
One of my colleagues.
I'm sorry, please, Jennifer, go.
One of my colleagues sent me an email the other day, and it said, "Hope you are having a decent week." And that kind of summed it up. Like, hope nothing is more terrible than last week.
I want to say 2 things. Number one, out of the blue one day, I got an email from Andrew several months ago saying, "How are you doing? What can I do to help?" And we got on a call and we caught up for an hour, later that week. And it was the highlight of my week. And just that simple act of reaching out to somebody can have tremendous impact on somebody that you don't even realize it has when you do it. But this sort of reminds me, my kids are now in college, but this reminds me of middle school, right? Nobody thrives in middle school. Everybody survives middle school, right? It's like the toughest time of your life. Well, we're all going through middle school right now. We're all just trying to survive the pandemic, and nobody is really thriving. But some people are better at faking it, just like the cool kids were better at faking it in middle school.
Tim, I just want to build on what your last question, which is what I hope for is that this isn't a time and a place for these learnings, that we all take this, and when we are back together, that we've all grown somehow and are better leaders, managers, friends, colleagues, because of it.
Yeah, that's great, and I think we will. But I'm always, because I think empathy is a muscle, if you will, and if you use that muscle enough, you develop muscle memory and you become empathetic by nature. But I'm always reminded of the humorist P.J. O'Rourke, who wrote in a book. He said, if that trip to Tuscany was as life-changing as you claim it to be, why are you the same ass you were before you left? So hopefully we are not the same asses that we were before the pandemic, but it has changed. And I think we have. I think if you look at this, the social justice issue, and people who took to the streets in July and didn't just go away after 4 or 5 days like they had in the past. I think in many ways we may have reached a tipping point. We may have reached a tipping point in terms of diversity inclusion. We may have reached a tipping point in terms of social justice and racial justice. And hopefully we've reached a tipping point in terms of empathy. So let's turn our attention back to marketing, although I find this conversation fascinating. But Jason, you brought up the term engaging your fans earlier, engaging people. So I think we all, as marketers, understand the importance of engaging consumers, whether it's on behalf of our company, in Andrew's case with Visa, in your case Jason, with your fans and your sponsors, and Jennifer with your clients and the brands that they work with. Engaging people is what we do, because until you engage them, you can't have a conversation with them. So so to me, in the realm of partnership and partnership marketing, engagement is the foundation upon which any and all houses are built. So let's talk about the future of consumer engagement. Andrew, I want to start with you because Visa has historically been known as one of the most innovative companies there is, in terms of technology, in terms of products and services, in terms, all to the end of trying to gain what, is known as share of wallet, right? You want people, if they're going to pay for something, you want them to use a Visa card. So how do you see engagement going forward, and what, to the extent that you can share some of the technological and other types of innovations that you guys have either launched or are thinking about launching? I think everybody would find that very interesting. I know I would.
Well, it's for you, Tim. So I'll kind of cut it into two pieces. I think probably the business piece may be less interesting to this group, but certainly, we think there's been an irrevocable change in the way people pay. If you just think about the experiences you have, certainly if you're in the United States, in many of your local retailers, in many cases, you've got retailers saying, we're not accepting cash. You've got instances where we know that there are merchants who've been resistant to installing contactless terminals that have turned them on. And then the other part of that is e-commerce, right? Just the amount of transactions we're seeing that have moved to e-commerce is significant. Now, on the flip side, there's no travel, which isn't great for our business. But there's not a single marketing initiative or partnership that we could have had that has changed the dynamic so much as this pandemic has done. And again, we think that's probably here to stay. You talk about the things that are habit building, and again, we think once you get in the habit of either buying your groceries from paying, at the terminal with either a mobile device or a contactless card, we don't think people are going to go back. I think from a marketing perspective, and I kind of intimated this before, but again, the value of digital and virtual experiences, the value of and working with rights holders and thinking about how do we take a Giants experience as an example and deliver it to more people. Certainly deliver it to more people in the Bay Area as opposed to nationally. And how do we do that differently than you might get from a broadcast experience? And how do we create value specifically for Visa cardholders, which historically with the Giants has been you get early access to tickets, or you get a seat upgrade, or you get some sort of benefit at concessions. If you're not at the game, which there's only going to be 42,000, I think, that can actually attend the game. How do you create that value, especially in a world where 0 people are attending the game? So, I think that's going to be that is the challenge for us is how do we, how do we create value? I think the other bit for us is how do we look at the products and services that we have, and how do we help solve problems that our partners have? And I think a perfect example of that is a trend you're starting to see, primarily with the NFL, but I think you'll start to see in other places, is many teams are announcing that when they do bring fans back to the stadium, their stadiums will be cashless. And the root of that is touchless payments. And that is obviously core to our business. And we've had a lot of conversations, both with the league, with all our partners, even with entities that we don't have formal sponsorship relationships with or partner relationships with, about the expertise we can bring to bear as a solutions provider as it relates to touchless payments.
Jennifer, how do you convince your clients, or do you even need to convince them, that they're going to have to change the way they think about engaging with consumers or their, the people who are paying them to be endorsed?
It's not really been a challenge to persuade them that change is needed. Ultimately, these are all human beings, and they respect that, all of us have been challenged to be safe, stay home, etc. Whether it's Emmett and, he has 2 children in college, including one who's a freshman at Stanford, out there to play football and kind of dealing with the uncertainty of the world. Everybody kind of understands that, if you're going to be a marketable personality, you need to be flexible, you need to be prepared. It's been amazing to kind of see the tech savvy of each of our clients just go up so fast at a time where, in the past you might see, their screens are, not set up right, or they don't have the ring light, they don't have any sort of, real preparation for virtual events. We've done multiple shoots via Zoom recently with brands. Just again, going back to another Emmett example, he's done shoots for both Johnsonville Sausage and General Mills, all on iPhones and with Zoom supervision from agency partners and brand executives. It's not ideal. It takes probably twice as long to do and to get the shots that you need. But it's important, people want to be involved in marketing campaigns, and so they find a way to make it work. I think we're all kind of raring to go and to get back to in-person events and to get back to travel. But we understand that it's going to be a process. There's no vaccine, there's no accepted treatment. We still don't really understand the disease. So I think we're all kind of just getting as creative as we can be as far as how we can continue to be marketing clients and brands.
Okay. And Jason, much like Visa, you guys at the Giants have historically been known as, leaders in technologies, leaders in innovation. How do you envision consumer and fan engagement going forward? And how does it change? How does it remain the same? What are you looking forward to?
God, those are a lot of questions, Tim. I think my head goes right to sort of the biggest challenge we have, which, the biggest challenge really is we don't know what we're going to be facing in the spring when we welcome fans back. And I think we're hoping for the best and planning for the worst. And, but somewhere in between is the reality that just like we had to transition when we were dealing with the severity of terrorist attacks and had to step up our game when it came to screening for a venue like Oracle Park, we got to do the same thing now around people's health. And so thinking about how are we going to screen people coming into the ballpark. And we've been fortunate that, given we're located in San Francisco and adjacent to Silicon Valley and having partners like Visa, Andrew mentioned a bunch of things that we are lucky enough to be sort of a beta for lots of payment technologies that Visa is creating. We were one of the first venues to have contactless payments, and frankly, this year we were moving toward biometric payments. So you won't have to.
And what is that? What is biometric payment?
So we're in partnership with Clear, the airport security partner, which they are now looking at creating technologies that could be fully integrated. So from your entry into the ballpark through purchasing concessions, your Clear membership can handle it all, and your ID are your eyes, or it was maybe your thumbprint, but we're going to be going away from that. So it really is optical that we'll know who you are, and guess what? Your Visa is associated with your account. So if you want to walk up to a stand that's Clear and Visa enabled, you just lean in to the iPad, it recognizes your face, your eyes, and get what you need. And that's from start to finish. So you don't have to touch anything, frankly, on the way in. And what Clear is working with us on is something called Health Pass, where we're also going to be integrating things like temperature checks. And if you've had a recent COVID test, that'll be we'll know that about you, and all, of course, secure and private. But that may be the new reality at some level. And then we're figuring out, so if you are in a venue, and we're seeing it now in a lot of NFL games, and in what we're seeing in Texas with the National League Championship Series and the World Series, is reduced capacity. So if we're at 25% capacity, how are we staggering entry? How are we helping people in sitting in sections where they are appropriately distanced? How are we handling concession sales? Those are the challenges, frankly, that we're worried about first. But we're in the midst of the process now. It's a lot of unknown, and it's not fun. But it back to sort of what this whole thing has been about, which is we're pushing ourselves to think differently, which is important. There's a lot of disruption coming out of this.
That's great. And so we do have one question from the audience. Alex asks, what practices have you adopted during the pandemic that you think will stick for the future? And I think we've talked about that. So I'm gonna hopefully we've answered that over the course of the conversation, but I'm gonna ask you, what personal practices have you guys adopted since this thing has started? And do you envision continuing? I will start. I've lost over 20 pounds since this pandemic started, simply by walking. My wife has asked me if I would consider doing one-way walks instead of round trip, but that's a discussion for another day. So, Jennifer, what have you done? What habits have you developed, or things have changed in your daily routine?
A lot has changed. I have actually decided to pursue a teenage dream of living by the beach, and sometime in 2021, I'm going to be moving to LA, and still with Octagon, still doing my thing. I also got a tattoo, my first tattoo. And
Wow.
When I told my mother that I was getting a tattoo, she said, "At your age?" So, yeah, and there are ways that this has been, really the toughest year, but it's also been, a time to be introspective and to think about, what you want to let go of, and, what you want to try. There are too many things that I kind of pushed aside as something I would do someday, and it's now. So putting things in place for an exciting 2021.
That's great. Andrew?
Yeah, first of all, kudos, Jennifer. It's really a great and refreshing approach. We joke in our house that, if there was a bingo card related to all the things you're supposed to do during COVID quarantine, we'd be at blackout. Whether it's the puppy, banana bread, sourdough, the good and bad, if you will, of, kind of working from home is the amount of time you get to spend with your family. And, there's definitely friction that happens, but one of the things I really enjoy is, I got 3 girls, and, my 7-year-old and I go on a bike ride every morning, before, her school starts, and that sounds wonderful, and it's a great bonding moment, but it's really because she just has so much energy, and I need to wear her down today. But there's a lot of stuff like that
She'll never forget it.
Yeah, she might. She might.
No.
Well, you won't, Andrew.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, stuff like that with the family has been really great.
I was thinking about another Cornell alum. Sorry to jump in, but Mark Tatum, I don't think a lot of people realize that he commutes from Princeton to New York City every day, and, never got a pied-à-terre in New York City. He wants to spend every night with his wife and kids back in Princeton. And so his ability to just be home all of that time that he's not commuting, and all that time with his family. I mean, I just said, I'm like, you're that creative and you're that successful when you're doing so much awful commuting. Like, I can't even imagine what you're going to pull off in the next year or so. So,
yeah, for those of you who don't know, Mark is the deputy commissioner of the NBA, and he likes to joke that Cornell has produced 2.5 commissioners, Commissioner Bettman, Commissioner Manfred, and Mark. And I like to kid Mark that he used to travel 5 weeks a month with his job. So, Jason, you've always been a paragon of virtuous living. Anyway, what habits have you developed, or how has your life changed?
Okay. I love hearing Jennifer and Andrew and Tim. That's such a great question. What are you doing during the pandemic to better yourself and to change habits? And and silver linings, and there are silver linings. I mean, I think family number one, which certainly during the baseball season, I don't do a ton of travel, but it does feel that way during a baseball season with the number of night games and weekend games, and the gift of being close to family and being able to witness things and be part of things that I hadn't been before has been wonderful, and that continues. And I hope that I can continue doing that going forward. I think back to the point I made about you can work from home and still be productive. I'd like to see that continue. Some things personally, I out of the gates started running again, got on my mountain bike, did stuff like that, which I continue to do, which is great. One thing that I'm doing, which I'm very frustrated by, but it is amazing to try doing it, is learn how to play guitar, and doing that with my daughter. And we're doing that virtually. We started doing it here when she was stuck at home, but now she's back at college. And so we're both doing virtual guitar lessons and learning some of the same songs at the same time, which is kind of fun.
That's so cool.
The pandemic is so long that I have tried to learn the guitar and put it down and tried to learn it again.
So I know, Jennifer, you have also become the adoptive mother for another cat, which has made her presence known on this call.
She's behaving. No, it's the baby that's behaving.
Okay. But I think one of the common themes about what we've all done is we've all tried to address sort of our psyche and our mental health, which I think for all of us is so incredibly important. And it's an overused phrase, but I've tried very hard to stay in the moment through this thing, and I've not always been successful. But quite honestly, doing that has really got me through some tough days, and we've all had tough days. So we've only got a couple minutes left, so I want to do sort of a quick hit around the horn. I've got individualized questions for you. So Jason, I'm going to start with you. Next summer, therapeutics are in place. The vaccine has been effective. What does Oracle Park look like? And, what's putting a smile on your face next summer?
42,000 screaming fans back at the ballpark, and, just a winning team and partners fully engaged and back to whatever new normal is. I that overused term of new normal, whatever that means, but I miss seeing people, and I miss a full venue.
All right. Jennifer, you're back on the plane. You're going to Maui or Des Moines or wherever it happens to be. What does 2021 look like for you other than your toes in the sand?
Yeah. I hope it's celebrating a couple of New York Times bestsellers and seeing clients on national TV campaigns. Beyond that, I think I'm just going to be, grateful for some normalcy. I was just sitting here thinking, like, the biggest thing I miss is like working in a cafe with my laptop instead of, only doing it here, just being around people and hearing, a little crowd buzz. I hope I'm at a concert. I hope I take a real vacation. But ultimately, I feel pretty lucky. I'm healthy, I'm employed, I have a home, my family's good, I have a noisy cat. It's my life still has a lot of love. And so I'm just hoping to return to society feeling really grateful and appreciative.
Great. And Andrew, next summer you're in Tokyo. What can we expect from Visa at the what will then be known as the 2021 Olympic Summer Games?
I'm hopeful that that I am one of 42,000 in Oracle Park. I hope you all are one of 42,000 in whatever park is relevant. That you're traveling. That you're back to the lives that you had before. And you want to talk about Visa? Fine, using your Visa products. But the reality is we'll get our fair share. But getting back to normal, I think is paramount for everybody. And I think to the stream of questions that kind of touched on this, that we're all coming through this in a better place than when we started, and taking lessons from it that makes us more empathetic, more engaged, more collegial, We're reaching out to people more regularly, and I agree with Jason that we're not doing it on a one-dimensional device, but we're actually looking at each other's eyes, even if we can't physically be in the room with them.
Yeah, as my mother loves to say, from your lips to God's ears, for all of you. Thank you for that, and thank you for taking the time to join us, Andrew, Jennifer, and Jason, and thank you for those of you who are watching. I hope you took something from this. So, everybody, have a great evening. Thanks.